Hi there, welcome to Rent Prep for Landlords. I'm Andrew Schultz, Community Manager here at Rent Prep. I'm also a real estate broker and property manager with over 14 years experience in the rental industry. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at different payment processing apps to figure out which way is the best way to collect your rent money. Let's get to it. It's becoming more and more common for tenants and landlords to want to pay and receive their rent money using some sort of a digital means versus the checks and the money orders that we've been used to in the past. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with using the old school pen and paper, money orders and checks and things of that nature, and everybody always says that cash is king, but we've reached an era where online bill payment is here to stay. And if landlords don't have some sort of a digital means by which to receive their rent money, they're going to get left in the dust. Today we're going to take a look at 4 different apps: PayPal, Zell, Cash App, and Venmo. Those are 4 of the most popular payment apps out there in the marketplace right now to see which one should rank at the top of your list for receiving your rent payments. We're going to take a look at the fee structure, the processing times, whether or not someone can reverse a payment that they've made to you, whether there are any buyer protections for the tenant, and so much more. And by the time we're done, you should have a really good idea as to how to go about collecting rents on a digital basis. Before we jump into the individual apps, I do want to spend a minute talking about some of the general pros and cons to using digital payments. But obviously, we're going to start off with the pros. The first biggest pro overall is going to be convenience, both for you and for the tenant. The fact that somebody can send you a rent payment from their smartphone or their computer anywhere in the world, and you don't have to wait for that payment to arrive and then take it to the bank, deposit it, wait for it to clear. All of this is super convenient and it speeds the entire process up. Convenience above all else is the reason why people choose to use online payments. And the second overall pro that I want to mention is speed. I just touched on it obviously as part of the first one there, but the nice thing about these apps is that even if the money's not in your bank account physically right away, you do get an immediate notification that a payment has been made, which will allow you to kind of figure out where you're at in terms of your rent collection and know whether you have late payments that are still out there pending. You're not waiting for the mail to show up and hoping that there's an envelope with a rent check in it every single time the mailman drives by. So at least you'll have an idea that the payment has been made, even if the funds aren't necessarily in the bank account right that second. Now, what about the cons? So there's several more cons than there are pros, in my opinion. But again, your mileage may vary depending on how your business is set up and established. The first con that I want to talk about is processing times. Obviously, we did just touch on this a little bit, and in general, there's going to be some lag between when a payment is made and when those funds physically hit your bank account. From what I've seen, the processing times on all of the apps that we're talking about today are going to be substantially less than the amount of time it would take for a tenant to go and mail a rent check or a money order, for that envelope to find its way through the postal system and eventually find its way all the way to your doorstep. We'll get into more specifics as we talk about the individual apps. The next con that I wanted to bring up is processing fees. We're going to touch more on this in a second, and obviously we'll touch on it in all of the individual apps. But if you're using a business account to collect your payments, there are going to be fees associated with the services. Some of these can be avoided, but it does come at a risk, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Another con that might be pretty substantial depending on the circumstances that you find yourself in is that it's going to be very difficult to limit who can send you a payment or limit how much that payment can be. So for instance, in some states, if you are in the middle of an eviction proceeding and a tenant issues any payment to you, could be for $1, that may reset your eviction proceeding. So if you're in a state where something like that is possible, you really have to do some further research on these apps to make sure that you can block some or all payments that may be coming in the event that a tenant is trying to issue a payment to you that you then can't reject from them. Also note that while we talk about payment reversals and cancellations individually for each app, anyone who makes a payment using one of these apps can go to their bank directly and dispute those payments at a bank level. So even if we say that an app has no reversals or no cancellations, the bank could obviously decide otherwise. This is a universal risk for any of these apps, but it's the same universal risk that you take if you accept a debit card, a credit card, a check, basically anything that's not cold hard cash. Any of those can be disputed at the actual bank level itself. I would not let that stop me from using these apps. The final con that I wanted to mention is that There is going to be some sort of a transfer or a withdrawal limit in a lot of instances. So if you're using these apps to move around a large amount of money, you may need to figure out what your withdrawal limits are and whether or not you're going to brush up against those or not. Eventually, you're going to want to move your funds from the app into your actual bank account. That's where these withdrawal limits tend to become an issue. And depending on how much you are receiving and transferring, you may run up against those limits. They're usually pretty high, but pretty much every app seems to increase your limits once you've gone through an ID verification process. And then as you use the app more and more, it seems that they tend to increase the amount that you can move around because there's more of a trust factor there, I guess, that gets built up over time. Now, before we jump into the apps, I do want to spend just a couple minutes talking about how to go about using these apps correctly. Most landlords, especially small landlords with only a few doors, tend to sign up and use these apps under their personal names and not as a business. The problem with that is you're using a personal account on any of these apps and you receive a rent payment, which is a commercial transaction. You've automatically violated the terms and service for that app, and it could put you in a little bit of hot water. There are a lot of consequences that can come from misusing these apps, using a personal account for business transactions, things of that nature. They could shut your account off, they could hold your funds in limbo, and I'll be right up front, PayPal is famous for doing this. I know of someone who was using a personal PayPal account to conduct business from, and when PayPal discovered it, they locked his account with something like $60,000 in it. And it took 6 months to get the money back. That's definitely something that you're going to want to consider if you're moving large amounts of money through any of these apps is there a risk where my money could be tied up and I would not be able to access it? Also keep in mind that your funds may not be covered under FDIC in all instances. We'll talk more about this on a per app basis as well, but knowing that these apps are not the same as an actual true bank account, you need to understand that your funds may not be covered by FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, in the event that something happens. If one of these apps was to fold, you want to know that you're going to get your money. So if you're using any of these apps, my strongest recommendation would be that you treat your rental property like the business that it is and register for a business account. Yes, you're going to pay some fees by doing that, but it's part of doing business. And honestly, I think you're a lot safer paying that small percentage on your transactions versus running the risk of having your funds locked up and inaccessible for some period of time. My recommendation is to have a bank account just for receiving your rent funds and writing expense checks related to your properties. That's going to make everything a lot easier for you come tax time, and it's also going to make your day-to-day accounting a lot easier for you to manage. You can conduct business under your personal name using a business account, but you need to talk to your accountant to make sure that you're setting yourself up and structuring yourself correctly so that you don't wind up in hot water down the road. With all the pros and cons covered, let's go ahead and jump into these apps. We're going to go ahead and start off with PayPal. Everyone's heard of PayPal. It's been around for what seems like forever, and it's basically the great granddaddy of payment apps. PayPal charges fees ranging from 1.9% to 3.49% of the incoming payment amount, depending on how that payment was made, whether it's a credit card or a check or whatever the case may be. PayPal does allow a tenant to cancel or reverse a transaction, so that's something to keep in mind. And PayPal does offer buyer protection to the tenant, which they could in turn employ to try to use against you after a rent payment has been made to get a refund. So when it comes to processing time to get the funds out of PayPal's account and into your bank account, you're going to be looking at 1 to 3 business days, or you can do an instant deposit and they charge a 1.75% fee for something along those lines. And the withdrawal limits with PayPal will vary based on how you're going about withdrawing your funds. If you want to request a check, it's going to be much lower than if you are doing a direct deposit into your bank account. But it seems that there is about a $25,000 per transaction limit. PayPal is not a bank and is not insured by FDIC. So if you have funds sitting in a PayPal account, those funds are not FDIC insured. We're going to move on to Zell. One of the key things to note is that not all banks and credit unions are signed up to work with Zell, so you need to check with your bank or credit union to make sure that they are enrolled. This is something that the bank has to enroll in, and then you enroll as a member of the bank. Any fees charged by Zell are basically decided at the bank level, so you're going to have to talk to your bank to find out what the fee structure would look like, and it's going to be your individual bank that decides that, not Zell itself. Zell does not offer the ability for someone to cancel or reverse a transaction, and they do not offer any sort of a buyer protection as well, to the best as I was able to find on their website. The one nice thing about Zell is that it moves funds from one bank account to another bank account, and it's pretty much immediate. Your tenant isn't sending funds to your Zell account, and then you have to turn around and withdraw the funds back out of Zell and into your bank account. This is an account-to-an-account transfer. So because of this, there doesn't seem to be any sort of a withdrawal limit, because there's no withdrawal. You're going from account to account. There's no withdrawal necessary. In addition, your funds would be FDIC insured because all of the funds are in a bank account at all times. There's never a period of time where they're sitting in a holding account or something like that with Zell where they would not be subject to FDIC insurance. The next app we're going to take a look at is Cash App. We're going to start off with the fees. Cash App charges between 2.5 and 2.75% as a transaction fee, depending on the incoming payment method. They do not offer any sort of ability for someone to cancel or reverse a payment once it's been sent. In addition, they do not seem to offer any sort of a buyer protection program as well. In terms of processing time, you're going to be looking at that 1 to 3 business days between when you request the funds and when the funds actually hit your account. Again, there is an option for an instant deposit, and that comes with between a 0.5% and 1.75% fee. Again, probably depends on the style of bank account that you're using. Once you've verified your identity with Cash App, there does not appear to be any sort of a withdrawal limit, but funds left inside of the Cash App software are only sometimes insured by the FDIC. So if you have a cash card, which is part of a program offered as part of Cash App, that is a normal bank account. Once they issue you that card, they've opened a bank account or you've opened a bank account, and you can use that cash card to take money out at ATMs and things of that nature. If you have a cash card associated with your Cash App account, you are FDIC insured because that is considered a bank account. If you don't have the cash card associated with your Cash App account, anything left inside of Cash App is at risk. It is not insured under FDIC. Last but not least, we're going to take a look at Venmo. Fees at Venmo are 1.9% across the board. Pretty straightforward. They do not offer the ability to cancel or reverse a payment once someone has set it, but they do offer buyer protection whenever someone is purchasing from a business. Venmo has a unique feature that allows you to tag a transaction in a personal Venmo account as a business transaction, which would then enable the buyer protections on that transaction as well. The payment fees seem to be the same whether it's a business or a personal account, and the processing time to get your funds into your bank account is again going to be in that 1 to 3 business days range. And again, they do offer the instant deposit option with a 1.75% fee. They do have a $50,000 per week withdrawal limit with Venmo. So that's something to keep in mind, and that's once you've verified your account. It's actually lower than that until you've done that ID verification process. Funds held by Venmo are not in a true bank account and are not FDIC insured. So as you can see, all of the payment apps out there do have pros and cons. Overall, I think that there are a lot of things that you do need to consider when you're looking to choose one of these payment apps. And again, I would caution you to make sure that anytime you're using one of these apps, you are using them within the terms of service for the individual program so that you don't wind up in some sort of hot water or missing a payment or something along those lines. You may find that one of these apps does work better if you're signed up for a personal account versus a business account, but you do run that risk of being shut down at any time. I'll admit that it's a pretty small risk. If you're only running 1 or 2 transactions a month, the chances of getting caught are very, very small. But as you're running more and more deposits, as your portfolio starts to grow, if you continue to use these payment apps and you're using them incorrectly, your risk does go up. So there you have it. We have an intro to payment apps here and how you can go about streamlining your rental collections. Are you using any of these apps currently, or have you already moved on to some sort of property management software? Drop us a comment down below and let us know. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Andrew Schultz with RentPrep.com, and we'll talk to you soon.